Oka, a percussion professor at UMass.
Thank you, Liz. And I'm so excited and honored to introduce and welcome Jason Turing tonight. Jason is a founding member and current member of Soul Percussion, one of the leading percussion quartet groups in the world for the more than 20 years since group was founded in 1999. The idea of their group name Soul was brought up by actually Jason's sister, Janice, who I know as well, who has been living and working in Japan for more than 20 years. And then the word Soul means performing or presenting, but can also mean to be successful or accomplished. The group was made groundbreaking performance career over 20 years as one of the few percussion quartets by performing at prestigious performance venues such as Lincoln Center, Miller Theater, and Walt Disney Hall, collaborating various artists in different fields to create original shows, which I believe Jason is going to talk more about it. And most recently, So made a triumphant return to Carnegie Hall for a sold-out performance of a percussion century to present wide range of percussion ensemble repertoire from John Cage, Steve Reich, Xenakis to the newest commission work by Julia Wolf. They released more than 20 albums and has been performers in residence at Princeton University for 6 years, I believe, and where they also take place SOSI, So Percussion Summer Institute. That would be an educational side of the activities that Jason is also going to talk about in regards to how they vision to contribute their artistic and education activities to the community. So Jason, I just give you from now on. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ayano. It's really good to see you and good to see all of you. A few faces I know and a lot of new folks. Of course, I wish we were in the same room together and we could actually meet each other. But I'm really grateful for events like this to be able to kind of share things that are on my mind and hopefully hear things that are on you all's mind. When I saw the theme, the music, community engagement, and social action, I definitely am excited to kind of share what So's journey and what my journey has been thinking about these three things. I think it's fair to say that at the beginning, see if I can get the lighting better, that feels better. At the beginning, when So first started, I think, of course, music was on all of our minds. I think pretty soon into our careers, community comes up in many ways, but it's something that was kind of an organizing factor around the way So thinks about ourselves. And I'd say in the last 8 or so years, I think social action has been more and more on our mind. So but I definitely come here to kind of share where I'm coming from, but definitely don't see myself in any way as a authority on the subject, but whether more of a case study of sharing where my group comes from with these ideas, and I'm definitely open to any questions you all have, and actually would love to hear where you all are coming from. When I was talking to Liz and Ayano just earlier in the week about this presentation, they mentioned that folks have gone about it in different ways, and it became obvious that my talk is going to rely more on informal sharing of where I'm coming from and anecdotes, and a lot of hopefully time for some showing you some music, some kind of clips and videos. But if at any time you have a question you want to throw in the chat, please do. I'll try to keep an eye on it and get to that as we go. And then at the end, hopefully we'll have some time to really just hear what's on your all's mind. For me, as a musician or as a person, I guess my short history, I would say when Liz had kind of asked if maybe I could start sharing some about just my personal story, I realized when growing up, social justice and social action was something that was on my mind a lot through my family. My parents were and still are very active members of the Catholic Church in California, and it wasn't until I moved to the East Coast that I felt like Catholic churches could be weird. I have no, I'm not just meaning, California Catholics were very social justice involved. And that wasn't a practice as much as I saw on the East Coast. So I grew up doing big projects through the church, and kind of was drawn to social justice work, homeless, working with homeless shelters in LA, and on immigration policy and those kind of things through the church in California. But when I became a musician, it wasn't something that was on my mind in terms of the music I made. I think I met the other members of So Percussion when we started in 1999. We were grad students. Maybe some of you all are grad students. Got to school, really pumped to play chamber music with friends, and to dig into really difficult music. And my music practice in my head was very separate from my kind of social justice and community practice. And in some ways, I think even in the late 90s or early 2000s, I think it was maybe more common, especially as a percussion group, that felt like we were trying to perform in spaces where percussionists weren't performing very much. Almost we were maybe intentionally not wanting to rock the boat. You know, I remember thinking in early 2000s around political campaigns, you know, I would never say from the stage anything about politics or anything about kind of issues that would be on my mind. Those things were very separate from my work as an artist. And I think all of us, and so remember, there's this one very specific moment. It must have been around 2009 or 2010. We play, you know, so we were touring, we were playing a contemporary repertoire, music that we really love and were passionate about and had spent hours on. And we were at a concert series in Montgomery, Alabama, and we were playing two nights of shows. And the presenter there said, one of the members of the boards of directors wants to come. He works at the Southern Poverty Law Center, and actually can't tell people where he's going to be because there are death threats, active death threats on his life right now. And so he wants to come to one of the shows, but we don't know if he'll be able to come, kind of thing. I remember thinking like, wow, that's intense. And so we played the show the first night, and halfway through the show, this person was seated with his wife, really near the front, just sat on the floor, like, right, it was a packed kind of church space, just came up and sat down on the floor. And it became obvious that this board member was there who was working on some really serious issues around you know, hate groups and racism in Alabama. And I remember while I was playing, having this moment where I was like working so hard to sound good on this really intense polymetric music, and thinking like, having that moment that maybe some of you all have as an artist of like, I'm spending all of my energy on this thing. This guy just showed up, didn't know if he could come because there were death threats, and is spending his working hours working on something that's much more meaningful in some way. I when you zoom out, I don't necessarily believe that, right? Art is very meaningful. But I had this moment of questioning of like, wait, I spend 8 hours a day on this, and there are people out there spending 8 hours a day on this other thing that is just objectively more important than what I'm doing, you know? And so I remember, you know, we met with him and heard his story, and of course he didn't see it that way. You know, he you know, as many people do, you know, see how important the arts were. But I just remember the rest of that tour being in the van and having these conversations with my buddies about, you know, we're making this very abstract music that I believe strongly in, but like, should we be making music about something more important? And so this is maybe, you know, 12 years into our work as a quartet. And so I, you know, not that you need to know so much about us as a quartet, but we moved to Brooklyn in the early 2000s, and it's been our main job for since then. We tour around to performing arts centers and you know, play up at UMass and Amherst, or you know, tour around. That's what we do. So we were making a show. We had started to make shows that became multidisciplinary. We had done a couple shows that were evening length shows that we had written the music to, and we're about to embark on a new show like that. And usually when we were to make a show like this, oftentimes it would come out of some text, something that somebody was reading that could be kind of a jumping off point. And so at that moment, as we're riding around in the car, one of the guys in the group, Adam, is reading this book by a kind of famous urban planner who lived in New York, whose name was Jane Jacobs, and had very strong feelings about the way neighborhoods, around the way successful neighborhoods would be organized. And in New York City, this was a big conversation because in the 60s, I think, she had these like kind of very public kind of battles with another urban planner named Robert Moses, who really had different feelings about how he felt the city should be laid out. And he basically won out for the most part. And that's why there are huge, freeways that cut through big swaths of Queens and Brooklyn and divide up neighborhoods. It's why huge numbers of people were evicted to build big parks like Prospect Park, and so, and his idea was a bit more utilitarian, which is like, maybe if everybody lives over there, drives on these big freeways and works over here, that'd work well. And Jane Jacobs kind of thought, well, maybe there's a messier way that life could work that could be more interesting. And if you live in the same place where you work, in the same space that you eat, and you are part of a community where your neighbors are also, you're supporting their, maybe their shops, or you're going to see music in the same spaces where your neighbors are going to see music, maybe there's a more vital conversation that could be happening. We were interested in this idea. We were living in Brooklyn at the time. And this was a conversation around a lot of gentrification that was happening in Brooklyn that we ourselves were a part of in some way. And we're thinking, so much of the music we make is ultra organized. Jane Jacobs' idea is a bit more chaotic, a bit more, what if you let a lot more ideas into the mix? Can you get to something that's maybe going to be messy, but also maybe going to be more interesting? So the first time we decided to make music that felt a bit more about something was a project called Where We Live. And it jumped off of this idea, which was, let's bring a lot of ideas into the mix. Let's bring ideas from video makers, from theater directors, from writers, from choreographers, from artists of all types, singers, and see what we get to. And it was a really, really messy and difficult process that led to something that's just unlike anything we've ever done before. And if this is the first time that you know anything about So Percussion, this is going to be a strange first thing for you all to see. So imagine if you've never heard of my group before, never seen us play. Oftentimes, maybe you would see us do things that are very rhythmic and very active and hockety, and oftentimes on instruments that maybe are homogenous in some way. There's the first big piece of music that was written for us, all four of us would be playing on the same kind of homemade instrument of wooden slats. And then for 12 minutes, we'd all be playing on metal pipes with big drums. Very kind of organized music. So the piece I want to show you just for a second comes from this piece, Where We Live, because it was the first time we started to think about something a bit more tangible. This is going to be a little bit laughable because it's still very, very abstract, I think, and hard to pin down. But this was the first time we moved into a territory of something more tangible. And the clip I wanted to show you is going to involve one of the members. He wrote a story, so he'll be delivering a monologue. The moment that you're first going to see, there's a guitar player guest, where part of the show every night, this guitar player would just stop and start talking on stage about something. And Josh, who's telling the story, had to have a conversation with this artist, Gray. So it every night made it kind of wild. And then there's a choreographer on stage who every night would take a note, would write down on a piece of paper a note that she'd rip out of her notebook and deliver to one of us on stage. And even though we had a piece of music that we were having to play that could be highly technical, if Emily delivered a note to me that said, hey, stop playing drums and go look out the window, I had to go stop playing drums and look out the window. I had to kind of do what Emily was instructing me to do. So you'll see in maybe a minute or two, you'll see a few of these things. Just as an example of the really wild way that us as a group first started to think about making music about something. Let me make sure it's here. All right, so this is Gray, our collaborator, an old friend, who's going to be talking about something.
I'll bet she was actually happy to see you.
I'm sure she. I think
probably
because
you were
that's
just
what she was yelling about.
You were alive.
I was alive.
Perhaps.
She was mad that.
If it's 2 in the morning and you're 12, maybe.
4 or 8. But.
I can't remember the next 20 years. There were the occasional Cleveland Browns games with my dad throwing things at the screen while my mom graded papers at her desk, actively ignoring everything and everyone around her. She was amazing. She is amazing. She's the all-knowing gatekeeper to every room in the house. If I was even thinking of jumping on my bed, she would hear my thoughts, like I projected them through the house on a megaphone. Don't you even think about jumping on that bed. And every night, we would all get together, all of us eating the exact same meal. A few memories are completely frozen like the VHS tape on pause. Degrading a bit over time, but still shaking on the screen of my mind. My dad bent back to throw a pitch number God knows what at me, training me to be a little league catcher when he could still throw. My brother in his clubhouse in the backyard, pretending it was a sport against all evil.
Stop sharing. That was weird. Are you guys here? Can you hear me now? Well, I think that music was just so chaotic. It just proved my point somehow, by kicking me out of the meeting. Okay, so I don't know how much of that did you see. Did you see Emily get up and deliver a little piece of paper to the guy speaking? And did you see the fear on Josh's face when he got that piece of paper? Because he's like, wait a minute, I'm supposed to be reading this text and you want me to walk up to the front of the stage without my music and talk to the audience? And all of us are feeling like, wait a minute, you just told him to leave the microphone and walk up to the front of the stage, right? So like part of the point of this piece, I think, was to get to some of the chaos that was built into this Jane Jacobs idea. So this piece toured for many years, maybe 2 or 3 years, and every night it was different. I actually just found an envelope full of notes I had from Emily. She gave me a note that the night my second daughter was born that said, you know, come up to the front of the stage and show everybody how big your daughter is, you know, how how long she was when she was born. Like we traced a lot of important moments with this piece. And during the night that it was loading into our biggest performance, a spot in Brooklyn called the Brooklyn Academy of Music, which for us is kind of living in Brooklyn, this was a big important show for us. That morning, all of us got news of the Sandy Hook shooting in Newtown, and all 6 of us, the main collaborators, so the 4 of us, and so Gray, who plays guitar, Emily, who gave us the notes, actually, and Aine, who was the director. So all 7 of us who'd been working on the show for a couple of years kind of heard that moment at the same time, and something about us all getting older. One of the members of the band has a stepson who was about that age, and this moment hit us all, but it obviously hit the 7 of us sharing this moment. It hit us in a specific way. And so as this piece toured, the Sandy Hook shooting was what we all started to talk about in the van. And when you're touring with a group of folks, when you're sharing small spaces with them, and you're talking about these big issues, it became obvious that the next show we needed to do was about that in some way. And this was making music about something is really new for us. Maybe it's strange to say, but our lineage, the space we come from, Ayana mentioned the show we played that was 100 years of percussion music. It's kind of traced back to these beginning folks in the 30s, folks like John Cage, Varese, folks who were making music out of noise, folks like Chavez, Johanna Bayer, Harrison, folks who were gathering sounds from a lot of different spaces, and it was noise-based music that was not about something. And so us kind of trying to wrangle these 2 things of the kind of abstract scene we come from, but feeling like we needed to make music about something, it was new for us, and it was scary for us. And when we would tour around and play shows that weren't about anything, people would kind of stand up and clap a lot. Like there were shows that were like pretty virtuosic music that were joyous. And we were feeling like we needed to make music about things that were a bit more intense than that. And so I can see now, looking back on these shows that toured, for us, they were somehow statements of values that we have as a group, statements of identity, that kind of said, we feel like we need to do this. Our managers would say, do you really need to do this? Like our booking agents would say, it'd be a lot easier if we just did this other thing that everybody likes, right? And so I want to play you a lot more music, but I want to zoom out for a second and let you know that over the next 25 minutes, I want to make sure to hit some of the music that we play, but also get into some of our ideas around communities that we've been building that are really important to us, and get to, by the end, some more specific kind of service-oriented work that we're doing. And I wanted to maybe just share one more thing to start off with, and let me see if I can do it without getting kicked out of our hang, which is, as a group, I think about So Percussion as an ensemble, as a band in some way, not in a band in terms of we're trying to make pop music, but a band in terms of we all have it's an egalitarian situation. All 4 of us have equal say in the way the organization runs and the way the music works. Our identity is tied into getting on stage and playing music for people. But we're also a nonprofit organization. And as some of you figure out different ways in the music world, something we learned early on from other groups that we looked up to, like the Kronos Quartet, or like Bang on a Can, a lot of dance groups that we really look up to, like Bill T. Jones or Merce Cunningham. They would organize their groups as nonprofits, which both allowed for fundraising to make new pieces happen. That's why we originally did it. And then as you build an organization, you start to really think about, well, what's the values? What are your organization's values? What do you stand for? Why is the government allowing you to not pay taxes. What good are you doing for your community? So I don't know if any of you have ever been tasked with writing a mission statement. Show of hands, anybody? Maybe in a class, maybe, right? I like when I was in college, I think I may have had to do one. And I didn't really, it didn't resonate with me at all when I did it the first time. It was like, why am I doing this? This doesn't make any sense to me. This isn't helpful. This isn't useful. But as we grew as an organization, our mission statement became more and more important to us. And so so terrible. Zoom doesn't want me to share, which I'm worried about when I get to actually really wanting to play you more music. But let me get through this moment by reading you our mission statement. So the reason I want to read it to you is that at this moment, when we began to really question what our values were as an organization and start to make music about something. Oh, good. Let me share. We rewrote our mission statement. It's not going. Okay, let me read you our mission. So Percussion is a percussion-based music organization that creates and presents new collaborative work to adventurous and curious audiences and educational initiatives to engage students, while providing meaningful service to its communities in order to exemplify the power of music to unite people and forge deep social bonds. So we wanted to tag on a vision statement to that would speak up slightly more directly, that says, to create a new model of egalitarian artistic collaboration that respects history, champions innovation and curiosity, and creates an essential social bond through service to our audiences and our communities. And so we thought a lot, we thought more about that statement than you'd think. We really wrestled with how to choose every word in that. Each of the mission statement and the vision statement is one sentence. And so how can we speak to the idea that we think music is really important for the reasons that maybe all of us love music, but also what music does is, and we feel this now more than ever, I think, it gets people together. Somebody coming to see our show is either there because we're on a university campus and their music appreciation class says they have to be there, or they're choosing to be there. They're getting babysitters for their kids. They're like spending time to go out and share an hour and a half with us. And the act of coming together to have a shared experience is really meaningful. And I feel like in the last 4 years, I have to say, that's become more and more meaningful to us as a group to say, we're gonna have a shared experience. And then, you know, as we teach, our summer festival, where there's a couple of alums on here, which is so wonderful. It's people deciding to come spend 2 weeks with us. And so really committing that those are bonds that we're forming together, and we can form those around music, and we can also form those around other things. You know, so we started to think more and more about how we could use our music organization to speak to other things that are important to us, whether that's you know, food insecurity in the community that I live in, whether that's gun controls ideas, because we all were touched and felt this moment of Sandy Hook together, whether that's, you know, urban planning ideas, or whether that's committing to carbon offsets as an organization, because we're conscious of the fact that every time we tour, we could be making another choice that would be nicer to this planet, right? So we've started to think bigger, and we tried to figure out how could we change the words in our mission statement to reflect that. So let me jump. I'm so terrified, you guys, because Zoom, though I'm talking to you,
We're not hearing you, Jason. Hang on. Did we- I'm assuming he got kicked off and will come back on.
What should we do?
Give us, let's give him a moment here.
Yeah.
Strange. This is a first.
Um,
It's a first for me too. I'm so confused.
Oh, you're here?
Yeah. I'm so sorry, you all. I'm sitting in my living room with perfectly good internet. I don't know why I'm gone. What was the last thing you heard me say?
um,
Okay. Well, thanks for making me a co-host.
Not sure. Yeah, just yeah.
Okay. I really apologize. You have to believe that the last thing I said was life-changing. And I'm gonna pick up. I hope I had shared my the reasons for rewriting our mission statement. Did anybody hear anything about our mission and values? Okay, well, I'm gonna go on. I'd love to show you actually a little bit more music, because there's two pieces that really got to more fundamentally making art about social issues. There was well, maybe I'll play you next. Let me play you a little bit of the piece. Yay, so this is our website. This is what I was reading that I wanted to share with you. So I told you we were all in the same space when we heard about Sandy Hook. So we made a big long piece that we played with some of Ayana's students actually when we toured in Massachusetts. And it was called A Gun Show. And here I just want to show you just a short clip about it, about two projects that are about things before we move on. So this one is a little clip about a gun show. So I just wanted to show you a little clip because the piece is really, really long and it's hard to excerpt. But one of the things that was really intense for us was going through the process of learning about gun culture from folks who didn't grow up hunting or using guns. And so we actually were able to buy these Russian guns online very easily, these gun parts. And so some of the show was written on these gun parts, which was intense to just have in the space. And Emily, who's a choreographer, started to actually choreograph the bodies on stage for the first time. So that was an intense project for us that happened over a long period of time. And at the same time, we got asked to make a piece in England. And I wanted to show you some of both of these pieces before we take a pause and see if anybody has any questions about music. This project was a project we got asked to do actually by going to the UK 4 times total. Each of us went 3 times, but on 4 different trips, kind of divided up. And we went to the northeast part of the country. And it was the part of the country that was known for coal mining, and all the coal mines were shut down in the 90s. And many of the coal mines were on the coast. So From Out of Darker Sea is a poem that was written about this coal mining town right on the coast, and all the coal waste would go right into the water, which for me growing up in California, coal and ocean were very separate. Ocean was something that was the beach in California, and coal was a kind of inland, Kentucky or West Virginia or Western Pennsylvania, inland. And so seeing the kind of black beaches and the water there was really intense. So we kind of really invested in spending a lot of time in this community, maybe 7 weeks total over a year, to make this piece about this area. And when starting to speak more about how we feel about community and how we think about community engagement, this little promo for this piece, I think, does a good job with it. And you'll meet a couple of the other members of the group.
I think one of the things that's been great working with East Durham Creates and Forma is their dedication to getting us in the community and just meeting people, talking to people. It's really daunting to make a piece about a place that you're not from. And there's a lot of responsibility that comes with that, and you want to do a good job and you want to highlight the things that you've seen without sort of alienating anything or misrepresenting something that maybe you don't understand because you don't know the context of what you're seeing. It's been really rewarding to actually get to invest in the community. I mean, really, it's only been 3 times, so it's not like we know everything about this community, but we know enough to be able to reflect on it honestly and genuinely from our standpoint and feel like we're representing a healthy view of the community.
I spent the most time with the kids from East Durham College, and they were all born after the last mine had closed. So for them, mining, it's not even like really on their radar in terms of an everyday thing, other than the fact that the towns they live in were founded because of the mines. For the kids now, the mining is already the past, but for their parents and their grandparents, mining is this more tangible past. And there's that's maybe the most interesting thing for me about the whole thing, is that there's this sort of tension that we all have when something important in the past sort of recedes away. The kids at East Durham College now all have iPhones, and they all eat pizza, and they all watch rap videos or whatever. It's like exactly like kids in the United States. So how are they choosing to define their lives was something that I got really interested in.
For me, I didn't think it was going to be me, but I did enjoy it at the end of the evening.
And you've got to support local things, otherwise nothing will be done, nothing will occur. So that's my opinion.
Fantastic. Absolutely more of it. I thought the venue was fantastic. The acoustics worked really well. To have a place like that packed with this community with not one spare seat says that it's successful. Doesn't it, really? I mean, there was no space in there for anybody else. So I think it's fantastic. Get them in, get the community, get it in the community. For me, I'm not up for high art. Bring it to the people rather than the people come to it.
I think one of the things about the way that we make our music and art together is we create things that open a door that sort of allow people to have their own experience. So I almost wish, I don't even know how many people fit in here, 200 people or something. I almost wish there's 200 people walking out with 200 slightly different, unique experiences tonight who can kind of make their own narrative. And I hope that everybody has a way of finding something in it that's familiar and finding something in it that's totally unfamiliar.
Okay, so apologies for that. Was a little promo video-ish, feeling like it, was saying what a good job we did. But I wanted to show it as an example of, I think, the way we think about community engagement, because I really like that the title of the series is Music, Community Engagement, and Social Action, and not music outreach and social action, or music you know, sometimes I feel like the idea of community engagement to me, what it means is taking a look at the spaces that we work, and then figuring out kind of genuine ways to make connections within those spaces. And that can mean many different things. It can mean going to a school, sure. That can definitely mean what it is. But I think that's not the only thing it means. And I think sometimes when we see outreach, I think what that means, what that used to mean to So is that we were going to play a concert that night in a concert hall. And during the day, somebody who didn't really think through so well an event was going to happen during the day. And we were going to be thrown into some space where some people didn't want to listen to what we were doing. We've been thrown on a tetherball court at recess, you know? Why on earth would anybody who's playing tetherball want to hear what we're doing? You know, that's just like, that's somebody I think saying like, yeah, cool, you're playing tetherball, but there's this, it's like medicine. You know, it's like, cool, play tetherball, but take your medicine while you're doing it. You know, we've been thrown in the hallway of a high school, you know, so like between classes, you know, people could hear what we were doing. I think that's like kind of box checking, you know, and saying that like, we think this is really important. We think this, the folks that play tetherball here don't know it's important. And if you put it together, that'll be really wonderful. That doesn't make any sense to me. But community engagement saying, we're part of a community that makes music in this way. We're going to a different community. Can we learn about what's happening in that community? And can we share where we're coming from? And can we find ways to make music together? Can we find ways to share stories? Can we find ways to share a drink while we're sharing life experiences? I think those ways of engaging between different communities is really wonderful. And I think, so I really love that that's the way it's presented in this title, because I think sometimes I guess I don't know for sure, but I'm thinking probably many of us on the call come from a classical music, maybe not a classical music background. I don't come from a classical music background, but like I studied classical music, and maybe do many of you study classical music? Is that part of the thing? Sometimes I think if the idea is that classical musicians are gonna share what they're doing with another community, there's a feeling of like the classical music is really great, and this other community that we're going into needs to know that. You know, this other community is a community of, you know, elementary school students that don't quite know how amazing this is, you know. And I think that's never a way to share, I think, you know, or to have a genuine exchange. So I think that's the way that So has started to think about our communities. And more, I think that's been something that's happened naturally for us. But I'll say now, I think over the last couple years, but definitely over the last 6 months, I think we've wanted to be an organization that's been more deliberate about how we think about what communities we're a part of, and how we can branch out and have genuine connection with more communities, and how we can be proactive, positive forces in the communities that we're in. And I think some of that can be by recognizing where we have strengths as a group and where we can make connections. And I think that can also be by recognizing where we have deficiencies. So for example, I think I said that's the last piece of music. I'm going to play one more piece of music that's going to tie together some of these community ideas before we open up for questions. So I think it's fair to say for So we've commissioned a lot of music, and we've worked with a lot of different artists. I think if you were to look at the body of work that we've collaborated on, I think we would be really proud of the number of different artists from different backgrounds have been a part of that work. We did a show in 2016 where we at Lincoln Center Festival, we played 3 nights, and we showed off 6 pieces that were written for us that were all really big 30-minute works. That's one of the things that we invested in really early on, and we're really proud of that music. All 6 of these pieces, once you saw them together, it became so explicit that they were all by 6 white men. All 6 white men who are friends of ours, who we love dearly. So clear when you put them together that our commissioning work in that realm had been incredibly narrow, and supported a narrow number of voices, white men. And so I think to look at ourselves in 2016 and say, that's not who we feel like we are. That's not who we think, that's not what our values are, but that's what our output is. We need to make sure 5 years from now, 10 years from now, that's not our output. And so I think not only making positive connections of seeing where we're doing things well, and maybe that's what I feel like our example of From Out of Darker Sea going to this town of Siam over the course of 2 years and really investing in that. I feel like we do that pretty well. I feel like we need to take a stronger look at the way we're commissioning and make some changes. And so I think we've been more deliberate with that over the last 5 years. And over this year, even during COVID, one of the ways we've decided to be deliberate about this work, if we say as a group, and if you were able to see our website when I was trying to share and did a bad job, we had our mission statement, our vision statement, and we had our statement about equity and anti-racism. And if we're going to make a statement in this space about equity and anti-racism, we have to be diligently working on those values. So one of the ways we've looked at that is to commission a body of work that is not just for percussion quartet, it's for open instrumentation. And that's been a really interesting way that we have found to work with folks who are coming from many different musical backgrounds that don't have maybe these kinds of kind of invisible gates that maybe we don't realize, right? So some of the music we make, you have to be able to read notated music at a really high level. Many of the musicians I love playing with improvise, like Gray McMurray, the guy who was on stage who was talking about being out at 4 a.m. and playing guitar. Like, he doesn't read music, right? He improvises. So we wanted to make a body of work that was for flexible instrumentation that we could tour around and play with many different folks. And we wanted to explicitly commission this work from young BIPOC composers who, some of them have been Soci alums, some of them are friends, folks that we haven't been able to work with yet. So maybe the last thing I'll play before I pause, and that's my screen, before I pause and see if anything I've said resonates with you all. Maybe I'll play, okay, I'm gonna play 2 things while I'm here. Really sorry. I'm gonna play the beginning, a short chunk of the first piece we premiered during COVID. It's by a friend, he's a Soci alum named Darian Donovan Thomas. Darian's up here. And this was a piece for 4 people, can be any instruments. And you actually have to find, there are different rules about the way the parts work, but you're specifically finding text that has to do with a topic that's meaningful to you, or that you find like you'd like to say something about. And in our case, the text has to do with structures of white supremacy. So in this first 3 minutes, you'll hear hate speech. So I suppose this could function as a warning of sorts, though I don't think it's anything explicitly triggering, but I guess I should say that there'll be some clips of hate speech talking about white supremacy, and we actually commissioned the piece along with a string quartet, and the string quartet piece had to do with a very different topic, had to do with anti-Asian racism, especially during COVID. So each group can choose their own kind of topic that they find important, that they'd like to make a statement about. So the piece is called Individuate, and maybe we can listen to just a couple minutes here.
I don't even know what a white supremacist would be. It seems to me calling somebody a white supremacist is like calling somebody a Dukakis supporter. There just aren't any of them around anymore.
This is what we are.
I'm okay. Did you know the participants were primarily sharecroppers? And many had never before visited a doctor. Doctors from the U.S. Public Health Service, known as PHS, which was running the study, informed the participants 399 men with syphilis and a control group of 201 others who were free of the disease, that they were being treated for bad blood, a term commonly used in the area at the time to refer to a variety of ailments.
This is what we are.
I'm
Well, I
okay.
believe that, like white people, if we reject this multicultural nation,
Did you
we'll be able
know
to
the
succeed
men were
and
monitored
then come
by health
together to
workers,
create our
but
own
only
country.
given placebos,
And then as I was
such
walking
as
away,
aspirin and mineral supplements, despite the fact that penicillin became the recommended treatment for syphilis in 1947, some 15 years into the study.
I'm okay. I don't want you to
This is what we are.
Did you know PHS researchers convinced local physicians in Macon County not to treat the participants, and instead research was done at the Tuskegee Institute?
I don't want you to hurt yourself.
Perfectly natural.
This is what we are.
I'm okay. I don't want you to hurt yourself.
Did you know in order to track the disease's full progression, researchers provided no effective care as the men died, went blind, or insane, or experienced other severe health problems due to their untreated syphilis?
Why is it that whites should
Did you know in the mid-1960s, a PHS venereal disease investigator in San Francisco named Peter Buxton found out the Tuskegee study and expressed his concerns to his superiors that it was unethical? Did you know that in response, PHS officials formed a committee to review the study but ultimately opted to continue it, with the goal of tracking the participants until all had died, autopsies were performed, and the project data could be analyzed?
I'm okay.
Did you know Buxton then leaked the story to a reporter friend who passed it on to a fellow reporter, Gene Heller of the Associated Press?
I'm okay.
Heller broke the story in July 1972, prompting public outrage and forcing the study to finally shut down.
I'm okay. I don't want you to hurt yourself.
Did you know by that time, 28 participants had perished from syphilis? 100 more had passed away from related complications.
I'm
At least
okay.
40 spouses had been diagnosed with it, and the disease had been passed to 19 children at birth.
I'm okay.
Did you know that in 1973, Congress held hearings on the Tuskegee experiments, and the following year, the study's surviving participants, along with the heirs of those who died, received a $10 million out-of-court settlement? Did you know additionally new guidelines were issued to protect human subjects in U.S. government-funded research projects? As a result of the Tuskegee experiment, many African Americans developed a lingering deep mistrust of public health officials and vaccines. Did you know? 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 Did you know?
This is what
Ooh, sorry to stop that in the middle there. Okay, while I have the screen shared, I just want to play a quick 1-minute clip here. So I mentioned, well, here, let me put it over here, I'll tell you what it is. So I mentioned that some of our work over the last few years has gotten more explicitly about social justice, not just or social action, not just in the art that we make, but also in more tangible ways. And part of that's been because some of the communities that we've worked to build include getting many people together in the summertime for a festival. Some other things that we do include a concert series we do at our rehearsal space. We've started to have studio ensembles and residents who need space, who can rehearse in our space for free. We've started to have a series of programs designed with these things in mind. But specifically at our summer festival, what we realized is that on our Sunday day off, it would be great to give everybody the day off. But if everybody chose to get together, we have 50 or 60 folks there who can do something really beautiful together and pack meals for insecure families that are in the Mercer County area. The summer festival takes place at Princeton. It's a really rich area. Very near Princeton are many families that are food insecure. And so we get together on Sunday and do a food packing event, which has become one of the coolest things we do at SOSI. Technically, it's not something that it's not mandatory for the students, but we've never had a student that's decided not to participate. We have a lot of fun, and we pack 25,000 meals each summer. So here's a little clip of that could end on a more high note. these are the students getting together and putting macaroni and cheese into bags with hairnets and all, filling those bags into a box, taking the box out to go on a truck. But I think that's just an example I wanted to share quickly, that I've been spending so much time on the more abstract things that we do as an organization, and I did want to do that because we're a music organization, and I think we didn't want to be necessarily an organization that, you know, we play music for our living, and then, you know, some of our programs that have to do with social action feel really distant. We want to make sure that they're all always connected. So oftentimes that is through the art that we make, but sometimes we do things that are more explicitly tied to social action, and that's become a bigger part of what we do as a group. I apologize so much for my technical difficulties that got in the way of showing you all some stuff, but hopefully I showed you enough stuff that at least one person would have a question. I'm down to stay for however much time there are questions, but maybe at least one person has a question to share about some of the many things I've shared with you all.
Sure, I do. So how do you find, how do you integrate your, other than through your art and through the things that you do, what do you see is kind of the biggest connecting feature between your social action and the music that you make? Is it usually the topic, or do you usually find more things that you're interested in, or do you find a need that is kind of most important at the time and kind of go in that direction? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. You know, I mean, I think if I had to, I mean, I'm proud of all of the music projects that I showed you. I think I would say, if I was to be self-critical, musically, sometimes the closer we got to making music about something tangible, I think the projects were good, but the projects weren't necessarily as strong sometimes as some of the other music we make. Those projects like A Gun Show and Where We Live were really, really important for us as a group, and in how we've grown, and just feeling confident in terms of expressing our values as an organization. From Out of Darker Sea, which you saw mostly just a promo video, that one tends, for me, is some of the stronger music that we made in this vein. Though that one's toward Europe, but we've never played it in the States, actually. But so to answer your question, sometimes I think the strongest things we do, we've been touring around a set of music of mine where the first half of the show we'll play a concert that you may expect from a percussion quartet, and the second half of the show is a group of flexible pieces I wrote called Amid the Noise. And in some ways, we've never thought of that music as community engagement or social action in any way. But what happens when we play that music is that wherever we travel, we meet new students, we meet new professionals, we meet folks who come from different traditions that can find their way into that music. So, you know, we've played with amazing taiko drummers that we wouldn't have other music that we could play with, but brought in the taiko band to Amid the Noise. We were in Trinidad and played with like a, you know, huge steel pan ensemble. You know, if we show up somewhere and there's a student who's an amazing tabla player, maybe, you know, some of the music by contemporary composers that's scored out, there's no way for us to collaborate. But this music, because it's mine, I can make choices at any moment also to bring anybody in. So actually, that kind of flexible music has been where we've found it's kind of spoken the most to some of these values in terms of community. And so that's why a lot of our commissioning these days, we still commission percussion quartets, but a lot of the music we've started to commission is looking to be more flexible, because that's where we've had some of our kind of most poignant and meaningful moments, you know. And I think, you know, these conversations I think are always changing. I think you know, without treading into politics, whenever somebody says that, you know, they're about to say something political. Without talking about politics, You know, the last 4 years were difficult years for society to talk to each other. I feel like that's maybe safe to say, no matter kind of what your political bent. It was conversation became something that was difficult. Agreed upon facts became things that were difficult. You know, there was just language and communication became like, wait a minute, there's a breakdown. And so the more in those years, the more we just got together with people in a concert hall and made music together, the more that felt like a political statement, that finding ways to communicate in different languages became something that was poignant for us. That wasn't the case in 2014 for us. You know, in 2014, we felt the need to make music about the Second Amendment. You know, so I think it's going to always change. But to answer your question, I think we always love to do things that are more tangible. Some of the projects we're doing now, a lot of the music we're putting out on Bandcamp this next year, you know, all the proceeds, you know, we're not looking to make any money of it. All the proceeds are kind of going to organizations that we really find to be doing great work. So the more tangible things are important to us, but the more abstract, finding ways to make music in different ways has been something that's really speaking to us right now. Did that answer your question, Raymond?
Yeah, cool. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Absolutely. Does anybody else have a question? I know in these things, oftentimes you may not. Yeah, Justine. Yeah.
Yes. Hi. First of all, thank you so much for speaking. I'm a huge fan of your work. I am just so impressed by the ability that your group has to collaborate with so many different composers and artists. And on top of that, I'm also just equally as impressed by the content of your performances, especially like the social justice components. And I feel like that must be in part by, you know, you can't really have like a significant impact like that without a really close community within your own group. So I was just wondering if you could elaborate about how you make, you know, tough decisions, like both musically and in terms of, you know, the content that you're going to perform about, because I would imagine that it's, you know, you wouldn't always agree on how you want to do something. So I was just wondering if you could elaborate on that. Thank you so much.
That's an awesome question. And a surprising, that was awesome. And you went a surprising direction with it, which is really important though. I think, you know, when we named our group, Ayana mentioned my sister helped to name the group. What the group was going to be named before we got to So Percussion was Flipping Coins. Terrible name. The reason is because if we got to where we were butting heads about something, we would just flip a coin to make the decision, you know? And there was like a paradox in there. Like I have strong feelings about music and aesthetics and art. You know, like if we were going to go out to pizza after this talk and speak about, as I've gotten older, I've tried to have a more open mind about my likes and dislikes. There's more and more music that I feel like is fine. When I was your age, when I was in college, I had strong feelings about my aesthetics. And it's just music. You know what I mean? Like, like at the end of the day, if we were having a band fight over, should we use the hard mallets that are brighter than the other mallets? You're like, okay, there has to be a better way to make this decision than fighting somehow, right? And so I think one thing that's lucky for us that's different from students is that we rarely, if ever, play a piece just once. So we're always making the decision in pencil. You know, it's kind of like we're making the decision for what to do today or what to do tonight on stage, knowing that you're going to get another chance to try something else, you know? So we're always making decision with that in mind. And if the other three folks in the group were here, I think they would agree with me when it is true that everybody has 25% say in creative decisions. We're also 4 different people where like Eric, skinny guy with glasses who you saw speaking, he's pretty quiet. And then if he says something, listen and maybe do that, because that he feels strongly about that. You know what I mean? Whereas me or Adam are probably like having ideas a lot. And I think, you know, so you learn to balance. I think if Eric ever is going to speak about the end of an argument and be like, no, I think it's really important we do this, I think I'm going to be like, yeah, let's try that. That makes a lot, you know, like, why not try that? We can always do something different the next time, you know. But on these pieces that we've been showing you, that I've been showing you, those kind of big multidisciplinary works, we've always brought in a director. And that's really different than playing chamber music, you know? And when we're playing chamber music, I think that's when I very much feel like a band, in terms of like, there's nobody telling us what to do. There's no conductor, there's no artistic director. We're making the decisions. In big works where there's video and movement on stage and topics and words, narrative, we have a few directors that we really trust that can help us on that, either because they're involved in the project and that's their job, or because they're friends that we can say, hey, could we just run this by you really quick? Like, how is this reading to you? You know, so asking for outside help, I think, is really important too. And something that I wanted to just inject in the conversation that that didn't come from your question, Justine, but came from the beginning of when you were speaking, and it made me think of something that when you were talking about collaboration, you moved into the space of the trust that the four of us have. But I think in thinking about our work over this last year and thinking about what music we can make during this time, and also thinking about that kind of the primacy of white composers that we've worked with, which, you know, I think we could have a whole other conversation about the many reasons that is the case in a lot of our spheres, but I'll just speak from my own. It kind of took a look at all the amazing folks that I've worked with over the past couple of years that we haven't commissioned. And even so, who kind of, we pride ourselves on like if a composer doesn't want to write down music on a clef, cool. If a composer wants to, you know, ask me to make up my own drum parts to their song, cool. If the composer says, I want you to learn every note like this on my Sibelius file, cool. Like, we are cool to work in a lot of different ways. But still, like, you know, a really, some music I was touring in Baltimore, one of the most amazing musicians I met over the last 3 years was this guy, Shotake. He's a beatboxer, a vocal percussionist. Never crossed my mind that we would commission Shotake, but I've played with him a ton. Why didn't it cross my mind to commission Shotake? Like, we work in ways that are perfect to working with Shotake. You know, so in some ways, I feel like this pandemic moment and this conversation about Black Lives Matter that has been amplified because of this pandemic moment, I'm not offering this as any kind of we have figured something out, so do this, not at all. But offering that one key that went off in my head was like, I was looking at the conversation of how to collaborate wrong. I was looking at all the amazing folks that I went to school with, which are awesome. I mean, you should look at all the folks around you to work with, absolutely. But why wasn't I looking at also folks that I worked with in very different ways? And so, you know, one of our other commissions is happening right now. We're going to premiere it in New York in December. You know, Shotake wrote us a piece by improvising in the studio 4 layers of voice and sending them to us to transcribe. I work like that all the time. Like, I do that when I work with Caroline Shaw. She has a Pulitzer Prize and nobody says like, Caroline, you didn't write the drum part that Jason plays. You know what I mean? Like, I work like that with all different collaborators. So in some ways, just looking at the conversation in a new way was really powerful. So I think when you are in a situation where you've been able to develop trust among a group and among different musicians, starting to just think more broadly about how the music is made is really powerful, I think, you know. So I guess just so I feel okay about the fact that I inserted that, to move back to answer your question just one more time, Justine, I would say, like, also, I think the 4 of us trust each other enough to know that we're all going to have some really bad ideas. And then if we trust the situation for everybody to just be kind of searching, we're going to find some really great ideas too. And sometimes I think as musicians, we're so worried about kind of messing up or something that we end up getting to we're always pretty good, but the risk taking and saying like, hey, we worked on a gun show for 4 years and it is not our strongest work, but it changed my life, so that risk was worth it, even though that's not the thing that there's other things we worked on for 6 months that have been much more successful, but that kind of risk taking was really powerful when we committed to it. So thanks for letting me add that into the conversation. I'm sure you all probably have to go. I have to go in a second, but if there's one more question, I love hearing what's on your guys' mind, you all's mind. Anybody?
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
First of all, thank you so much. This has been really interesting and inspiring how you guys have reflected more and more on where you want to go and any contradictions in who you are now. But in the meantime, you're pretty successful and you're at Princeton, and there must be a certain tension that comes with being associated with an institution that's so much the establishment and has its own issues on many of these topics. So maybe it's not really a quick question, but
yeah, that's an awesome question. I had a moment. I'm 43. I had a moment when I turned 40 that was like, okay, I'm not I'm not the guy with the new thoughts anymore, right? Like I am. You all are looking at me maybe as kind of the establishment. Like, I don't feel like So Percussion is the establishment. I don't feel like we're successful or we're an institution. I think there are other people in my life that look at us this way. And we're a nonprofit, and we have a summer festival that's called a Summer Institute. So in some ways we are institutional and establishment. And so my responsibilities are different now that I am that person. Now that I think I see myself as successful in some ways, but also, Liz, if you say we're successful, then we're successful. We're seen as successful. So we need to act with that responsibility. The reason I say that is in some strange way, and I say this, please help me feel like this analogy is okay, because I'm not saying that So Percussion is a super successful entity, but in our small contemporary music scene, we're a known quantity. Princeton is a university that I'm a part of that's also the establishment. And it's been interesting to see the way, in some ways, Princeton has been quicker to learn how to have a dialogue about anti-racism than So Percussion has. Not in-house. In-house, I think So is really comfortable. We talk all the time about what we want our organization to be. Princeton has been more vocal about statements. I mean, they're being sued by the Justice Department because they recognize the fact that their institution is built on white supremacy. So, like in some ways, Princeton has a lot of problems. And in other ways, I think the president right now and some of the student body and the music department, the kind of the ways the conversation are happening around equity and anti-racism in the music department in some ways are inspiring to me. And I feel like, wait a minute, if this institution is able to start having the conversations that quick, why isn't So able to do that? And for So, it's a little bit how to have the conversations internally and how to have them externally. I know for myself, this again could be a whole other hour of figuring out when you believe strongly in disrupting these systems of inequity. But I think it's safe to say I'm really grateful that you all have listened to me for 80 minutes. And I think you have because the way my group works, there's something I can offer that can be helpful to your conversations. There's another way to look at it, that the conversation doesn't need another white male voice in it this strongly. right? And so how, I think we've been having questions for ourselves, and I think Princeton, maybe this maps onto some of the things I've talked to with folks at Princeton, and how to be vocal as leaders, because if you're going to be an institution, if I'm going to be an institution, I want to be proud of the institution that I am. But when can you also make space, because I don't have the best ideas anymore. I mean, I don't know if okay, let me edit. I never had the best ideas, but as a generation of folks coming out of college who have ideas about how you want to disrupt the contemporary music scene, so had ideas like that for a while. And now there are much more kind of thriving ideas that are going to come from a lot of folks on this screen. So I do, I guess, I don't know if I answered your question, Liz, but I think of it in that way, where it's like institutions have a responsibility. And, I'm an activist that will be out in front of the Princeton Police Department asking for change. And when they change something, I respect that. Now, if somebody's asking for an organization like mine, I want to be proud of the choices we make as well. It's funny to be on both sides of that conversation and feel like an activist one minute and an institutionalist another minute. But I think the answer is a kind of responsibility. And I'll see, I'm actually about to go right now to another meeting where Emily Johnson, who you saw on stage, has made a lot of waves with an open letter. She's a Yupik artist from an indigenous tribe in Alaska, and she's made a lot of waves with an open letter about how she was treated recently. It's a long conversation, but some really terrible. She's spoken up about some really terrible ways that she's been treated as an indigenous artist, and in looking at the organization I'm a part of is going through a lot of conversations with the Lenape Center in New York and learning more about living land acknowledgements. Princeton, in some ways, is further along than a lot of groups in a lot of contemporary music groups when you go look at what their living land acknowledgement is. In other ways, they're very far behind. So I guess there's a strange paradox there that I've been trying to wrap my head around, Liz, that I think you asked about in a really, really great way. So I guess my answer is a little bit to be continued, but I'm thoughtful of the idea that the way I see myself is not the way that I'm seen. And maybe it doesn't matter the way I see myself. I need to act with the responsibility that my organization is seen as, not the way I feel. You know what I mean? Hey, thank you again for, as I said, I probably shouldn't be taking up all this airtime, but I appreciate having a space to share some thoughts that I have, mainly with the hopes that some of them could be useful for you. Not at all that we've figured anything out, but just that we're continuing to try to figure it out. And I'm really happy to be hearing where y'all are coming from too. So thanks for having a series like this, Liz. And thanks for your wonderful introduction, Ayano. I know you're stressing about